"Good morning, Julia," a gentle voice said. Julia opened her dark almond eyes and looked at the speaker. It was Kate, her mother, standing next to Julia's bed. Behind her, Julia could see fish gliding through an underwater landscape, as if her apartment had huge windows and was awash in the middle of coral reefs. A soft, turquoise light cradled the room. Kate was dressed in a catsuit of fine, elastic fabric that covered her entire body from tip to toe, including her fingers. A tight-fitting hood left only the face uncovered. Today is May 12, 2051. You have slept peacefully. Your heartbeat, temperature, and blood pressure are normal. Breakfast is ready and classes are... Julia, wearing a similar suit, waved her hand briefly and watched as the hologram of her mother's figure dissolved. Breakfast now, but before that, disinfection. Classes will begin in 45 minutes, another voice announced, sounding much soberer. It was the voice of the room, the voice of the guardians. She couldn't wave this one away so easily, but Julia nevertheless remained in bed and ignored the implicit demand. She watched the colorful fish that leisurely passed by her windows. Of course, she knew that in reality, her tiny flat, they called it a comb, was not underwater and had no windows. The landscape was fake, like the hologram of her mother. The walls of her comb merely functioned like screens that showed Julia what she wanted or what she was supposed to see. And Julia had chosen the coral reef as her good morning screen. The movement of the fish and the complementary light helped her start the day. There was another reason for her choice. This landscape reminded Julia of her mother. As a marine biologist, she had told Julia many stories of the sea and the creatures of the deep. So, like every morning, Julia followed the fish with her eyes and wondered. Was her mother doing well? Was she still working on the ocean? 12 years ago, Julia had fallen asleep at her mother's flat and woken up alone in her new comb. Since then, Julia has had no contact with her mother. Not once had Julia left her comb since then, nor had she met a single other human being in person. How many times had Julia begged Kate not to leave her and not to send her into the comb alone? But she did. The hologram that woke her up every morning didn't count for Julia, but at least the programmers used Kate's real voice for it. This voice was Julia's last and only connection to her mother. When the hologram had first appeared to Julia, she had believed it was Kate. In a fit of excitement, she had tried to touch it, but her arms had simply passed through and the figure dissolved. At that time, Julia had thought she had broken her mother or scared her away. Later, the teachers explained the hologram to her, but every time the hologram appeared, Julia remembered that shock. Of course, her mother had prepared her for the move to the comb. It was necessary, she had said, for Julia to stay healthy. Healthy children were the only chance for humanity to survive after all the terrible diseases that had killed so many people. From the age of 6, all children would therefore have to live alone in combs where they would be well cared for by the guardians. Kate had tried again and again to reassure Julia, but Julia had never really understood that at the time. With time, she had accustomed herself to meeting other people, her friends and teachers, only via screens or as avatars in virtual worlds. While that was at least something, it was not enough for her. The room's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Breakfast is ready. Before that, disinfection. Classes start in 40 minutes. Julia pushed the blanket aside and reluctantly stood up. She was dressed exactly like her hologram mother. Julia stretched and decided to cheer up a bit. Play my playlist. Music list can be played only after disinfection, the room replied. Julia rolled her eyes. Show news. News is only available after disinfection. A morning routine that Julia repeated every morning. The room told her what to do and what not to do. It annoyed her that someone else was deciding her priorities for her, someone she couldn't see and with whom she couldn't discuss. So she found ways to resist, a little bit anyway. Of course, Julia was aware that behind all this were the Guardians, the artificial intelligence of Pangaea. Her mother and teachers had explained this. The Guardians were the ones who, on behalf of the government, monitored everyone's lives and provided everyone with everything they needed: food, clothing, medicine, water, entertainment, and education. Whatever was needed to keep them healthy and make them good citizens. For the Guardians to do their job, the room constantly watched Julia, recording all of her bodily data. So, Julia didn't have to worry about anything. That was objectively pleasant in its own right, but still to her dismay. She had no say in the matter, nothing at all, even though it was her own life. Julia would have liked to protest loudly against this, but she bottled the temptation. In a few months, she would turn 18. Then she would take her exam and be accepted into the community of Pangaean citizens. She would be allowed to leave her comb to live in the outside world. Julia pinned all her hopes on that. Until then, she just had to stand the gaff somehow. Breakfast is ready. Before that, disinfection. Classes will begin in 35 minutes, the room's voice repeated mercilessly, ending Julia's daydreams. Julia gave in and went into the bathroom, the only adjoining room of her comb. There, she pulled the hood off her head, which fell on her back. She was completely bald. Eyelashes and eyebrows were also missing. She looked in the mirror. Her data immediately appeared: pulse, blood pressure, blood sugar level, grades in the individual subjects, and how much electricity she had produced this month. Not enough. The display was in the deep red range. With a casual wave of her hand, the data slipped away from the mirror. She was much more interested in her reflection, the face of a beautiful young woman with an intelligent look and a hint of melancholy. She moved closer to the mirror and turned her head to the left and the right. She examined her nose, her teeth, her ears, and pulled up her eyelids. Her face was the only guaranteed real human face she had seen in all these years, so she looked at herself closely every morning, looking for changes. Today, she discovered none. The Superflare, a science fiction novel authored by Andrew G. Berger. This is a demo audiobook produced by Sweet Audible using AI voice.